defense got beaten up like that.
Here's Hill.
They're going to have a chance.
And they call timeout quickly.
They actually have a chance to get Bucker in field goal range here. Hail Mary kicks. Got to throw it right away, right now to someone in the middle.
Down the middle. Oh, my goodness. It's going to be a 48-yard attempt.
Only 48 yards. That's what it'll be. I'm so nervous. So hundreds of thousands around the planet. The kick is good. It's going to overtime.
You are listening to KC Sports Network, the #1 podcast network for today's Kansas City sports fans. With former players from your favorite teams, informed perspectives, and former insiders, this is the place for you. KC Sports Network is proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
What's up, everybody? It's KCSN update time. It's your daily Chiefs video from us here at KC Sports Network. I'm BJ Kissel. It's Wednesday, which means we'll be joined by YouTube legend and X's and O's guru, Brett Coleman, to talk a little Chiefs-Bills coming up this Sunday as one of those marquee matchups that the NFL had when the regular season schedules came out back in May. And a fun little nugget here for you that we'll chat about with Brett. I want to get his opinion on this. But besides the 13 seconds playoff game last year between these two teams, historic, legendary game that I'm sure is going to be discussed quite a bit the rest of this week. These two teams are intertwined pretty heavily based on how their rosters are currently shaped right now. And this is per the Chiefs game release that came out just a couple days ago. The Chiefs and Bills organized a trade during the 2017 NFL draft that positively impacted both franchises. Kansas City sent 3 picks, including the 27th overall pick, to Buffalo in exchange for the 10th overall pick, obviously used to select quarterback Patrick Mahomes. But the Bills eventually turned those 3 picks into 5 selections, which included Tre'Davious White, Deion Dawkins, Zay Jones, Tremaine Edmonds, and Siran Neal. So that's a rare trade that seems to have worked out for both teams. We'll talk about that and more with Brett here in just a little bit. We'll get his key matchups for this game. But first, a quick word from our friends over at DraftKings. The NFL action is in full swing at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. We're talking touchdowns, big plays, and even bigger wins. New customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. And check this out. In addition to the usual bets, everyone can boost their winnings with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays. For example, if you want to use it for the game coming up on Sunday between the Chiefs and Bills, right now the Chiefs are 2.5-point underdogs at home, which didn't really see that coming when the schedule first came out, but the way that the Chiefs have played kind of up and down, the way the Bills have played, not altogether too surprising. And the over-under on that one is 54. But for DraftKings, to make things even sweeter, you can throw down on stepped-up same-game parlays once per game day all season long. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code KCSN to get $200 in free bets if your team wins when you place a $5 bet on any football game. That's code KCSN only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. All right, so right now let's welcome on Mr. Brett Coleman on the show. And you can find him on Twitter at Brett Coleman. You can find his work on YouTube and on Bootleg Football as well. He's a busy man. We appreciate him for joining us each week. Brett, we missed you last week. Before we get into the football stuff, are you feeling better?
You know, I don't know. I mean, you can probably still hear it in my voice. I don't know what I had or have. I'm still trying to kick it, but at least I can talk. At least I'm semi-functional this week, so I'll take the win.
If it makes, I'm kind of a mess too. Both my kids have been sick over the last couple of weeks, so I'll try to mute when I cough for all the listeners or people watching on YouTube. Apologize in advance, but when kids get sick, it's only a matter of time before everybody in the house gets sick. But whatever I have, it was not nearly as what I saw you looking like with the video that you put out on social media. But glad you're feeling a little bit better enough to talk at least, and a little bit better to watch some good football this Sunday. And the first thing I would ask, you look at the Bills on paper. I mean, this is a juggernaut. I mean, Chiefs fans get very upset when people talk about Josh Allen being the MVP or the best quarterback in the league. He's a phenomenal football player. He's the closest to Patrick Mahomes as somebody who's very biased in saying this, but you look on paper, the number 2 scoring offense, just less than a point per game average behind the Chiefs at like 30.4 points per game. Chiefs like at 31.8. And then they're the number one scoring defense. They're tied for first in scoring defense, allowing just 12.2 points per game. So on paper, this is one of the marquee matchups. And my first question for you is, when the schedule came out and you knew Chiefs Bills was coming up on October 16th, how much were you looking forward to this matchup as somebody that really isn't have a dog in the fight for either team, I guess?
I mean, this is just round one of the AFC Championship to me. I mean, I said both teams were going to be there at the end. I picked the Bills to go to the Super Bowl, but I also said when I made that prediction, like, Chiefs are going to be there. And when Patrick Mahomes is in the game, like, you really never know. So to me, this is just round one of that fight, you know, sizing each other up, just like last year was round one of that fight. And the Bills won it pretty decisively. And then the Chiefs came back and knocked him out in the playoffs. So I truly do think that these are the two teams that will be there in the end. I think 5 weeks into the year, we're seeing a stratification across the NFL of who's real and who's not. You look across the rest of the AFC West, might be the most, I don't want to say disappointing division, but it seems like the only team that's really lived up to expectations so far is the Chiefs. Shocker. But I kind of think that everything's kind of getting separated and the cream is rising.
We talked about it after the Raiders game, or even going into the Raiders game, that obviously at 1-4, not great, but I think they've lost those games by a total of like 13 points. I mean, they've been close in a lot of those games, and obviously the game was close last Monday night. And before I get into the schematic things that you're looking for between the Chiefs and Bills, I want to give you an opportunity just to give your thoughts on what you saw Monday night. Because again, we get this like Jekyll and Hyde Chiefs team where it's just sometimes they just cannot function in a way that we're used to. And we saw it against the Colts. We saw it in the first half offensively against the Raiders. And it's just such a interesting dynamic because the offensive line was so dominant. And granted, Trey Smith didn't play in this game, but offensive line being so dominant in a lot of ways against the Bucks, you know, rushing for 189 yards on the ground against that front. And then to come out and Max Crosby, give him all the credit in the world. He's one of the best edge rushers in the NFL that doesn't get enough credit for how good he is, but still the offensive line just struggling a week after playing what you would consider a better defense and not having those issues. What was your reaction when you saw the game on Monday?
Honestly, it's the same reaction that I've had for a while now, which is right tackle is still a problem. It seems like every time Max was getting loose, it was coming off that right edge. And I think it was Wiley, right? Wiley was starting.
Yeah.
And that particular spot, you know, whether it was back in the Fisher days or really whenever, that right tackle spot, when Mitch has not been there for the years that Mitch was there, has always been an issue. And especially since Mitch has retired, it has been an issue. And so I think that, you know, that's probably more of a question for the offseason, but they got to do a little bit more to help out Wiley, especially if you're going up against like a top edge rusher, because long gone are the days where you could just say, hey, Mitch, go handle Von Miller and we'll be okay. Like that can't happen right now. And I conveniently they're playing against Von this week. like that, they're going to have to give some chip help, because I know that Pat is comfortable living in the quick game. They can do that. They've done that for a long time. Against this defense that is so good at rallying and tackling underneath, unless you want every drive to be 13 plays, they have to give Wiley some help against these edge rushers so that Pat can actually stretch the field. Because without doing that and getting some chunks, eventually these drives are going to stall out, especially against a defense that's this disciplined.
I think, you know, we'll stay on the defensive side of the ball and the challenge that the Chiefs offense is going to have. And I know you mentioned it just right there, but schematically, what is it that the Bills do that puts so much stress? I mean, allowing just 12.2 points per game, obviously they've got talent all over the field, but you know, and that's for casual observers, people like myself who watch, like, man, they're fast, they're big, they're getting off blocks, they're doing all these things. But what is it they do schematically that the Chiefs are going to have to counteract that chess match and that stuff that you're so good at and knowledgeable with? What kinds of plays, what kind of schemes, what do you expect besides the chip help with Von Miller that he should be getting no matter who they play, but obviously going up against the right tackle and Andrew Wiley, who struggled against Crosby in a big way that was highlighted for the entire world to see. But what do you think is, like, what are the Chiefs facing schematically that could lead to them that chess match that we talk about?
You know, it's interesting how they play defense overall, and I actually have all of their coverage data pulled up here. They typically don't don't stick in Pat Mahomes' favorite coverage, which is cover 3. They don't stick in that more than 25% of the time. And their most common down for calling it is on first down, because obviously you want to stop the run on first down. But how they get into cover 3 is actually very similar to how the Chiefs often get into cover 3, where we're starting out in a too high look, and then we're either rotating weak or rotating strong. And that's on a down by down basis, depending on, strength of the offensive formation, field position, where the ball is spotted, everything like that, in terms of determining if they're going to be rotating weak or strong, not to mention personnel matchups too. But they typically start out in those too high shells and then rotate down into cover 3 in order to give an extra body against the run. But then you start getting into all of like the strict passing down stuff, and they're very even across the board in terms of how much quarters they call, how much quarter, half, how much straight up cover 2, really all the different variations of cover 2. And so they're very sneaky in terms of how they handle all that kind of stuff, and they make a quarterback think. And when you can get a quarterback to think and they have that kind of pass rush up front, eventually the quarterback realizes they don't have time to think, and they just start looking to check down rather than looking to stretch the field. And so I think they are actually banking on, okay, we're going to do some of these rotations so that we can give Vaughn or whoever enough time to, say, beat Andrew Wiley. And we're going to try to rattle Patrick Mahomes as much as you could possibly rattle Patrick Mahomes. We're going to try to rattle him enough to the point where we get to, 2nd and 7, and he's not thinking that he even has time to hit a dig over the middle, and he's automatically looking for Clyde underneath, or he's automatically looking for, Travis underneath or something like that. They don't want him to stretch the field, because they think if they can keep the Chiefs to all these 10-plus play drives, while Josh Allen, they think they can get chunks, eventually they're going to win that fight. So that's their general mentality, is rotate into cover 3 when we want to play cover 3, and everything else, do a whole bunch of other crazy Steve Spagnuolo-like rotations, force the quarterback to think, and trust the pass rush to get home.
On a very basic level, and talking about those rotations and trying to disguise things, what can fans who are listening to this podcast or watching on YouTube, what can they look for? Maybe pre-snap, to give them somewhat of an idea of what Mahomes is trying to go against. We talk about, what can they do to kind of offset some of those things? What are those chess match pieces that fans sitting at home can kind of remember listening to this and being like, I see what they're doing here? And then how do you kind of combat that? How can you gain as much information pre-snap as possible to help Mahomes make those decisions?
Look at the safety depth, because even if it's like 2 high safeties, if one safety is about 2 yards in front of the other one, usually, not all the time, sometimes, again, they do this to kind of, especially when it was Poyer and Hyde, because they're so experienced. Luckily, well, not luckily, but for the Chiefs, they don't have to deal with a full strength Bills secondary, which is so good at doing this. But most of the time, when you have 2 safeties that are back and one's at like a 10-yard depth and one's at like a 12 to 13-yard depth, the one that's at 10 is at 10 because that B gap is his, and he's got to hit it, because some of these runs that hit really quickly, not like the outside zone that hits outside that kind of gets strung out. Some of the stuff that really comes at you in between the tackles that hits quickly, like they got to get to the B gap or they're giving up 5 yards every time. So they'll be at like a 10-yard depth and kind of almost give away that they're rotating. And then, sometimes you'll see Pat, and especially Pat is so good at this. He'll kind of do a little bit of a hard count because he just wants to see which safety is opening. Because if you can see one of the safeties opening their hips towards the post, he knows which way the rotation's going. And he won't do a hard count and then reset. He'll just kind of do like a double count just to give himself a little glimpse of which guy is opening, because he knows he's going to get a single high look. He just doesn't know which direction it's coming from. So that kind of stuff I would say look out for is just look at the depth of the safeties. If they're both at the same depth, it's probably cover 2. If they're at a different depth, it's probably cover 3.
Okay. That's a good thing for everyone to watch for, including myself. Last question about the Bills defense. And I know it's kind of interesting to ask this. If they're susceptible in any way, I know they're banged up in the secondary. But you mentioned, the stress that it puts on, those safeties, knowing that they've got the B gap, and it immediately clued me into, a few years ago when the Chiefs had the most success offensively. Granted, personnel has changed a little bit, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire had one of his better games a couple years ago against this Bills defense, ran for 160 yards against them. Is it running the football? Is it attacking some of these new guys in the secondary? If you had to find a place where you feel like you'd have the matchup in your favor, besides just Travis Kelce in general, what would you say the Chiefs could do as far as how the Bills defense may be susceptible to certain things?
I would say going after Kyer Elam. Not that Kyer Elam's not super talented. Like, he's making plays, he's doing his thing, but he's still young. Like, he's still really young, and he still does get picked on a little bit here and there, especially by veterans that really, understand how to make a young corner panic by getting into their blind spot, how to play with route pacing, all the kind of stuff that obviously Travis Kelce does. But there's still some other veterans on this team that I think might be able to get Kyer Elam a little bit. Eventually, Elam, I think, is going to be phenomenal. But again, he's still learning. He's still in that phase of the first, month and a half of your rookie season when, oh my God, I'm in Arrowhead playing against Patrick Mahomes, and there's Travis Kelce, there's Juju Smith-Schuster. Like, how am I going to deal with this? You want to catch him now when he's still in that puppy phase and he's still learning he's still figuring out what he doesn't know. And so I would say anytime you're getting like a quarters look and he's isolated on the backside, because I know the Chiefs love 3-by-1 stuff. If you're getting like a quarters look and Elam's isolated on the backside, I almost kind of don't care who's on him. And I would take a chance, whether it's Travis, whether it's Juju, whether it's MVS, because all of those guys have been around the block at this point and have some tricks to the trade. And I would trust Pat to put the ball where it needs to be put to test a rookie corner.
Okay. That's another great thing to watch out for. And I want to switch to the other side of the ball. And I do think it's interesting, though, that you mentioned, it doesn't matter who it is. And I think you and I have talked a couple weeks ago about needing a standout performance from at least one of the Chiefs wide receivers. We hadn't really seen that yet. Any of those guys step up, and we saw MVS on Monday night step up and make some plays, some high leverage catches. McCole Hardman still playing through that heel injury, had a couple of big time catches on 3rd and longs that gave chunk plays for the Chiefs offense to move the ball against the Raiders. But for the Chiefs defensively going up against Josh Allen and this Bills offense led by our guy, Mitch Morse, what do they like to do? What kind of stresses do they put on, other than the fact that they've got a quarterback with a cannon who's 6'4" and can run like a running back?
It's interesting. I was looking at the running like a running back is a problem for the Bills, in my opinion.
We've talked about that before.
Because it is not even that like they do a whole bunch of design runs. Like, they do a whole bunch of design runs, obviously, but the problem is they don't just actively run the ball, and so it does put them in a bunch of situations where Josh feels like he has to scramble because it's 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 8 instead of 3rd and 5. And they just, every single play that you don't run the ball is a drop back pass, which increases the odds of Josh scrambling, which increases the odds of Josh getting absolutely tattooed. So I would like for them to run the ball more, but they're the Bills. They're never going to. I've long given up that fight. They're just not going to run the ball. As for what the Chiefs do, looking at their coverage data, they actually don't run a whole lot of like single high looks on first downs. They're at 14.1% cover 3 and 17.6% cover 1. So typically they actually live in other stuff like cover 2 and quarters on first down. And I'm not necessarily sure yet, because we're only 5 weeks in, is that a product of who they're playing? Because they played against Arizona, who obviously spreads everybody out. And then the Raiders were throwing bombs and everything like that. So, maybe they were playing a little bit more too high against them on purpose. But they don't necessarily play a whole lot of middle field close looks on first down. And I feel like the Raiders actually took advantage of that quite a bit with their run game. So if there was ever a time for the Bills to actually run the ball, it would be now. I just don't believe they're actually going to do it.
Yeah, that would be definitely an interesting thing to see them come out and run. the ball with Josh Allen, knowing that even if the Chiefs slow it down, and they're still going to put up points. You know, you can slow them down to a certain point, but the Chiefs are still going to score some points in the game. But what's the X factor in this game for you? What do you think could ultimately be the deciding factor?
It's funny.
And you can't.
My answer's been the same for this for like 3 years now. It's Matt Milano versus Travis Kelce. Because that's the game every single time, is who's handling Kelce, and then how are you handling Matt Milano, and how are they matching up against each other? Because Matt Milano is obviously really good in coverage, and you know, if he's out in the slot and you still want to play a too high look, you're not going to put a safety on him. Like, you're going to flex out Matt Milano and say, okay, you're way out of position leverage wise, but you have to be, because that's how we're fitting the run here from this look. Can you still handle Travis Kelce, who's got an option route on you and you're inside leverage and you're already dead to rights? Can you still make the play? Yeah. That is the matchup, is top 5 linebacker in the league versus top 1 tight end in the league. Who gets the better of who? And it's been that way for years now. And I swear to God, until they retire, I think my answer is going to stay the same.
Well, it's better than, I thought you were going to say turnovers, or, you know, getting pressure on the opposing quarterback, the usual suspects, if you will, regarding key matchups in the game. What's your prediction to close this show out? What do you expect to see on Sunday? That's gonna be tough, because
I think the Chiefs are going to win, because I don't think the Bills are going to run the ball, even though this is a game where they should. And keep in mind, going back to the Miami game, like I did, your audience could go back. I watched or did a whole video. It was like 20 plus minutes. I went to Miami. I saw that game, and I looked at historically how the play calling evolved between the Dolphins defense and the Bills offense in terms of how they were handling single high looks, and then how Miami ran a whole bunch of cover 2 this year against Buffalo and actually held Josh Allen down pretty well. But not just cover 2, it was how they ran cover 2. The Chiefs offense does a lot of the same stuff in terms of their crazy rotations into cover 2. So I think that on paper, their pass defense actually matches up decently well with this Buffalo pass offense. And I just don't trust the Bills to run the Chiefs out of those looks. And so I predict that eventually, death by 1,000 paper cuts, I think the Chiefs win the game. It'll be damn close, but I think KC takes it.
That's interesting, just because you follow on social media, and you obviously follow a lot closer, and you don't know where the takes are coming from. But so many people just thinking, because of what they saw with Davante Adams getting loose on a few plays, that it's going to be thrown all over the place. And not that it might not happen with Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis kind of emerging as another number 1 receiver that the Bills have. But you're saying that you don't necessarily see that it could happen. Obviously, they're talented dudes, but you don't necessarily see that being the case.
I think it's like, again, what was the score? 31-29 or whatever against the Raiders. Literally just copy and paste that score. It's going to come down to, fourth quarter. But I do think that, Josh Allen's going to throw 60 times and Devin Singletary is going to get 8 carries. And we're going to look back on Monday and be like, why did that happen again? So that's kind of how I see it. Also, by the way, fun fact, if Kansas City, and not that I'm like rooting for either team, but I do think that this outcome will be hilarious. If Kansas City wins, let's just assume they do. And if the Jets beat the Packers by tiebreaker, I'm pretty sure the Jets would actually be leading the division after week 6.
Exactly as everyone predicted. So, and I'm going to put you on the hot seat for 3 quick questions, because I forgot to get to this and I talked about it right off the top of the show. That trade going back to 2017 for both teams. A lot of times when you do a trade, winners, losers, it's normally pretty defined. As Chiefs fans, we remember the Jared Allen one that netted Brandon Albert, Jamal Charles, and you felt like, you know what, that trade actually worked out for both teams. You look at the Denver Broncos, Seattle Seahawks trade, for example, with Russell Wilson. That is not working out for both teams at all right now. Do you see that as being pretty even? I mean, at this point, with what that they were able to get, the Bills were able to get Tre'Davious White, Deion Dawkins, and Tremaine Edmonds, who I know from experience, like there were a lot of people in the scouting community that thought Tremaine Edmonds was one of the better players in that draft. So it's not surprising to see him come out and play the way that he did. And then obviously the safety and those guys. Do you feel like that's a pretty even trade? Even though the Chiefs basically got Mahomes and you got a Super Bowl, but
yeah,
it's one of those rare trades that worked out for both teams, it seems.
Since the Bills also got Josh Allen through other means, yeah, it's an even trade.
Yeah.
But if they were still staring down the barrel of like an EJ Manuel type quarterback, and it's like, well, we got a linebacker, we got a tackle, we got a corner, they got, you know, one of the best quarterbacks to ever walk this planet, I would have given Casey the nod there. But, you know, since they also got Josh Allen, yeah, we'll give it even.
All right, fair enough. All right, and then the Chris Jones this is the play that everyone knows about. What's your, you know, interpretation of that rule and how things have been kind of progressing within the roughing the passer and trying to protect quarterbacks through what we've seen, you know, through 5 weeks this season?
I get it. They want to protect quarterbacks. They want to protect Mahomes. Like they want guys like Mahomes to be on the field for games against the Buffalo Bills, because how many people are going to be watching that game because it's Mahomes versus Allen instead of backup versus backup? Like they want these guys on the field. That being said, it leaves such a poor taste in the fans' mouth when Grady Jarrett, you know, gently escorts Tom Brady to the ground and then Tampa just gets to win the game. Or when Chris Jones makes a phenomenal play and happens to land on Derek Carr. It's not like he grabbed him and slammed him to the ground. He just tackled him, which would be the same tackling form as if Derek was a runner down the field. And they're saying, well, he couldn't protect himself. Okay. Like, define protect yourself. Like, if he wants to protect himself, either like tuck the ball and go down or run or do, like, I feel like penalizing defenders for doing their job, which is getting the quarterback on the ground. And this is what got me, like, this is the same kind of thing with Chris Jones, but the explanation for the Grady thing was, oh, well, he put the quarterback on the ground in a forceful manner. Yeah, that's the job. And so like it happened to Chris again the very next day. And he, first of all, he's gotten so many bad calls this year. Like he's gotten absolutely wrecked by these zebras. And I don't know why. He's just a flag magnet at this point. And none of them make sense. Right. I feel like I understand you want to protect the quarterbacks, but it's put such a bad taste in the fans' mouth when they see that it's almost just as bad as seeing quarterbacks get, you know, beat to hell, like, because it makes it feel like the game is one-sided.
It's almost going to get to the point where like quarterbacks can't break tackles if they're being sacked. Like once you wrap your arms around the quarterback, he's done. Like he can't try to escape because the only option at that point is to try to forcefully bring him down. And for a player like Josh Allen, who is big, physical, runs the football, like it's just not even. There were the videos of Patrick Mahomes being thrown down exactly like Tom Brady did, and there wasn't a flag thrown. And so it's the consistency part that's bothering. And I've made kind of, you know, ingest a little bit, but I give Chris Jones some credit for not completely losing his mind.
Well, like, unfortunately, he's used to it at this point.
Yeah, like he's maturing in that way, and that, you know, there've been some, you know, times in which he's gotten some penalties and some things that, you know, are probably more valid than what we've seen so far this year. We just chalk it up like, yeah, that wasn't good. But in those moments, nobody would like blame him for absolutely losing his mind the way that Coach Reid did. I still say I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when at halftime when Coach Reid went and talked to Carl Cheffers before they went to halftime, because all the memes coming out and all the videos of how terrified the refs looked to throw flags in the second half. Pretty entertaining, but yeah. And then the last thing I gotta ask you about, because it was breaking news. I know you messaged me about it earlier, and I don't feel like I'm doing my job by not bringing up breaking news that are surrounding the Chiefs of the last Chiefs game. But Davante Adams being charged with misdemeanor assault for throwing down a camera guy on his way into the locker room after that game. And understand that was a very frustrating way for Davante Adams to lose, getting taken out by Hunter Renfrow. And I've seen a couple of former players at least bring up the idea of more security to get those players out without, you know, people walking around them where they are justifying, I guess, throwing somebody to the ground because it's busy over there after a game in the tunnel. But, you know, what was your reaction to hearing that, you know, he's been charged with a misdemeanor assault for what he did leaving the game?
Was it a a Chiefs team employee that he did it
I
to, or
don't
was it freelance? I don't know. If
Not one that at least I know. I think it's a freelance. I don't think a lot of information. I saw the police report. I saw his name. Not going to report it. I didn't know the name.
Yeah.
Not that I know everybody down there or anything like that, but it wasn't a recognizable like Chiefs employee. I think that would be I think that would have come out. That would be a little bit different locally.
Yeah.
Somebody would know, but yeah, I know that the tunnel can get busy, especially after games. Players are coming in and out, and I've been there in those situations, and you kind of just get out of those guys' way. Didn't see a ton of angles of it, but just in general, just an unfortunate situation. I don't necessarily believe that charging someone for assault in that situation, it's
the assault.
If it was
charge,
somebody else, maybe not, but like
the assault charge, I was kind of like, I mean, by the letter of the law, I get it, and I'm conflicted on it because I see like this. He looked like 25 and he's carrying a C-stand.
He didn't deserve that, and
no,
there should be
he didn't deserve it.
It definitely should be some sort of consequence.
Yes,
I don't know about that.
But, giving him a criminal record for it. I was kind of like, I don't know about that. Like, suspension, fine, and have the fine go to the guy if he has, because I guess he went to the hospital with some kind of potential, like they didn't even say head injury, they said potential head injury. So I'm not even going to try to speculate on what was going on with him medically. I can obviously see a suspension and a fine, an apology, and maybe covering whatever the guy's medical expenses were, because even just a trip to the hospital can be expensive. I totally understand that. Giving him an assault charge, when I also saw the other angle where the kid was just like, he literally just showed up out of nowhere in front of DAVANTE, and for all DAVANTE knows, like, he doesn't recognize this person, sees somebody with a big metal object. He's frustrated because of how the game ended. Should he have pushed the kid? Absolutely not. But I also understand that if I am just full of piss and vinegar and adrenaline and I'm walking off a field and somebody bumps into me with a big old metal thing, I'm not saying I would have done that, but I understand that a jacked up pro athlete that plays a very physical sport might react in that way. So does he deserve to be suspended and fined and the kid to be compensated for his medical expenses? Obviously. Does he deserve an assault charge? I stop short of that.
Yeah, I think, and again, to your point, not speculating on any kind of injury, because you hate for anything serious to happen on what, you push someone. It wasn't, decking him, wasn't throwing a punch, but somebody could be seriously injured if, in the wrong situation, they get pushed down to the ground, they hit their head on the camera that he was holding, whatever it is. That notwithstanding, seems like the assault charge is going to be the beginning of writing a check, which should happen. There should be a consequence. Like you said, the NFL is going to step in and do something. They can't not. They caught it on camera on a couple of different angles, but it'll be, I think, something that is talked about for a little bit. A check is written and then it kind of gets brushed under the rug and probably brought back up the next time the two teams play. DAVANTE will be asked about it. All the players will be asked about it, I'm sure, and they have to dance around it, kind of like you and I are. And that there's
nuance
no good
to it, like there's nuance for both sides. And I feel like people have approached, especially on Twitter so far, people have approached it without any semblance of nuance.
My favorite tweet that I saw, not to make light of somebody potentially being injured, but it was like, that was so egregious that Josh Allen should definitely be suspended for one game. It's like, DAVANTE pushed a guy to the ground. You definitely deserve a 1-game suspension for Josh Allen.
Yeah.
So,
but also, I guarantee you, every game at Arrowhead from now on, security is going to be clearing that tunnel like crazy because they don't want that to happen to their own player.
Yeah, those freelance photographers, I'm sure, are going to have an email or a training session about what not to do, because in fairness to the player, that kind of stuff shouldn't happen. You let the players get up and out. There shouldn't be a ton of things in the way. And being down there before, it's organized. Like there's security down there. They're clearing everyone out. It's just obviously, somebody got missed, somebody, scooted through the cracks or however it ended up happening. But yeah, unfortunate situation, but again, ton of nuance to your point. Brett, man, appreciate you for joining us on KCSN Update this week. What have you got working on? Where can people find your stuff? And what do you want to promote?
Ironically, I have a not even tangentially related Chiefs episode coming out because I saw Zach Taylor try to run another shovel pass inside the 5 and it didn't work again. And so I started pulling a whole bunch of like data on success rates for shovel pass inside the 5. Shocker, Kansas City's like the only team it works for on a regular basis. They run it more than anybody. They score on it more than anybody. And so I'm doing an episode just on that play and kind of the evolution of that play over the last couple of years, and why, unless you're Andy Reid, you're just not allowed to call it anymore because it doesn't work for anybody else.
I've noticed a lot of teams trying it, and I think I saw the play that you're referencing, where Lael Collins, I think, had the wrong block, and then something was brought up about that, and it looked really ugly. But interested, I will definitely check that one out. I don't know if Matt Canada and what he did will bleed into there, but I feel like there's some stuff that was either borrowed or discussed, or some inspiration based on some things that they had seen at the college level when Matt Canada was there. But I think he's out of Virginia at the time. But anyway, Brett, man, appreciate it. Look forward to all of that stuff. And everybody, thank you for listening and watching. We appreciate all your support of what we got going on at KC Sports Network. Plenty more good content coming up over the next couple of days. We've got the breakdown with Matt Hamilton and Matt Castle breaking down the Chiefs offense, some of the plays that we saw against the Raiders. And then Derek Johnson, Mike DeVito, and our guy Craig Stout will be breaking down the Chiefs defense coming up on Friday. So check those out. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Turn notifications on so you don't miss anything. And again, we'll see you all next time.